So now let's talk about downloading and saving multimedia files to your computer or to your server. So let's say you're using something like OpenAI. So OpenAI has a service called DALL-E that will create AI images for you. And so once those images are created, they're actually stored up on Azure, so Microsoft's cloud system. And if you do not download the images after an hour, they will get deleted. So you've already paid for the image, you already found an image you like, but if you do not download it onto your system, it will go bye-bye. So basically what I'm going to show you how to do is how to download these files. Again, they could be anything from images to videos to audio files to PDFs. Basically with this, we're going to be downloading files now, not just ASCII text. Now I do have to throw in a warning here. If you download copyrighted content, be very careful, right? This is the kind of thing that you can use to scrape the internet, to download images, to download movie files, to download audio files, that type of thing, to put onto your server. And what I'm going to say, again, one of the warnings that I will give you is just because something is technically possible doesn't mean it's technically legal. So that's just a warning. If you start downloading other people's content, be careful. Here's a basic script on how you're able to download a file from the internet using the request module. Right? So basically we're going to import the request module. If this is not installed within your environment, use pip to install it within your environment. And then we're going to find a URL. We're going to find an image to download. So I went to Ars Technica and basically I did a right click. I did a find like image address in order to find the address of this particular image. And so this is the address that goes all the way down to a JPEG. And this is the image that we want to download. The next thing that we have to do is come up with a file name for the image. This is one of the quirks with Python, is even though this has a file name, right? The current file name is Starship, ITF2, staging, blase, blase, blase. When we download it, it's not going to keep that file name. We have to give it a file name of some sort. And so here, I'm just going to create file name variable, and we're going to make it equal pic.jpg. So it's just going to be pic.jpg for the name of the file. We're then going to go to response. Response equals request.getURL, right? So we used request.get before. So we are going to go to this URL and we're going to bring it down as an object. So normally when we're looking at text files, we're looking at websites, we might use read or read lines to pull the text out. Well, basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be doing .content, and that is going to give us the content of the file. Then we're going to do with open, as we've done many times, the file name. So we're going to create this file name, and it's going to be WB, right? So basically this is write for binary. It's actually binary. I always think it's bits or bytes, but it's binary. And so what this is for is basically this mode is for writing, again, for multimedia type files. We're going to call it as file, just you can call it whatever. File is just the normal one, colon, and then file.write response.content. So basically into file name, pic.jpg, we are going to write the contents from this particular URL. If we go here and we look at File Explorer, we can see I don't have anything. I just have my current script here. So now I can run this. And when I run this, just so you can see it, I now have that pic.jpg. And then if I click on pic.jpg, we can see this is the picture that I downloaded from Ars Technica. So this is no longer in Ars Technica. This is actually sitting within my file structure. Now I'll just show you how you can get some URLs just so you can start playing around with this before we have more classes on web scraping. So you can come to Ars Technica here and you see all these images. So see his face here, this Mark Zuckerberg. What we can do is we can do basically right click. And then what we can do, go down and do copy image address. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's copy image address. So that is copying the URL for where that image is. I can then go back to my script, right? And then basically what I can do is I can delete what's currently there. I can then paste that in, right? So that's got pasted in. So that now works. We will now call this pic2, so it will be a new picture. And now when I run this, we can see that pic2 now exists, and I was able to download this beautiful picture of Mark Zuckerberg. Now, if you want your code to be a little bit more sophisticated, again, imagine this is a script that's constantly running to scrape websites, of content that you have a legal right to, right? Anyways, you have this going on. One of the issues that might come up is what happens if a URL is basically inaccessible, right? You have a URL that you're going to try to communicate with, but when you try to communicate with it, it fails out for whatever reason. Maybe the image no longer exists, or maybe there's just a hiccup in the system and the specific second that you're trying to connect to it, you're not able to connect to it. So that is where you can use an if-else statement and basically do that if statement being conditioned on the status code. So whenever you go to a website, there's status codes. So a 400 error generally means there's an error on your web browser. A 500 error generally means there's an error on the server. A 200 status code basically means everything is working properly. So we take a look at this. This is essentially everything we had before. But before we download or try to download the file, what we're going to do here is we are going to do an if statement. So if response.statuscode equals 200. So 200 means it worked. So if it worked, we are then going to do with open file name WB as file, and we are going to write to our current working directory. We will then print out on the screen the file was downloaded as the particular file name. If for some reason that file was not accessible, so you do not get a 200 code, you get some other kind of code, we don't care. Any code other than 200 doesn't work for us, right? Then we get the else. We don't run this, so we don't hit an error, right? And we're simply going to print out failed to download file, status code, and whatever the status code is. So if we care, we can go and try to figure out what's going on. So basically, checking based off of status code, based off of that 200 status code, is an easy way to give your script a little bit of fault tolerance so that if for some reason this image doesn't exist or it's just simply not accessible when you're running the script, that your entire script doesn't fail out. So that's all there is to downloading and saving files. Basically, all you're going to do is the .content. You write the response, and you're going to do the .content. That is what you're going to save. You are going to have to figure out what that file name is going to be. It's one of the quirks, the technology world. You think about like file names, like, oh, that's easy. But again, especially think about a system working at scale, especially if it's working relatively quickly. But seriously, how are you going to name files? Especially if you do WB, that will overwrite. So if you name a file one name and you reuse that name for a different file, then that file will simply be overwritten, so you will not have saved everything that you thought you were going to save, right? That can be an issue. And so that's one of the things you have to think about, like with file names, is how are you going to do the file names? Are you simply going to do like a count, a number, start at 1? Every time you download something, it goes up by a certain number. That's something you consider. Timestamps. I'm a big old fan of timestamps. You can just do a timestamp. So whenever you download an image or you're about to download an image, the file name simply is the current timestamp. Maybe add a few numbers or letters to make it a little bit more unique. Use that as the file name. So one of the important things you have to be thinking about with this is simply how are you going to name the files. That sounds like a stupidly easy task until you actually sit there and you're like, no, but seriously. Seriously, what should the naming convention be? But anyways, that's really all there is to it. As with everything in Python, shockingly simple.